Chapter 1. Macedonians were filled with joy and elation as they celebrated another royal wedding. Philip, the leader of Greek allies, was marching with the Greeks to Asia and was elected to the supreme command of the Allied Greek Council. The wedding was an opportunity for Philip to bid a grand farewell as his daughter Eurydice, a noble Macedonian, was marrying him. Although his 5 other wives were indifferent to the affair, his queen Olympias, mother of his only competent son Alexander and princess of Epirus, was celebrated as the queen of Macedonia for the past 2 decades. It was a momentous occasion, and Philip's farewell wedding was celebrated with great joy and splendor. Olympias's injury. Political custom required that Philip should be linked by marriage to his neighboring subjects, and Epirus and Olympias had met this need for the past 20 years as an Epirot princess. Epirus were to marry into Philip's family. She would not be required for Philip's politics or private life. They were assisting at the last rejection of his queen Olympias, planned to settle his home kingdom and its borders before he left for Asia. Philip's guide observed as a local peculiarity. The wedding that brought them was planned, they found, in their own Greek style. There were banquets and athletic games, prizes for artists of all kinds, and recitations by famous Athenian actors who had long been favored as guests and envoys at Philip's court. For several days the Macedonian strong red wine flowed freely, and golden crowns were paid to Philip by allied Greek cities who knew where their advantage lay. In Greece, the Delphic oracle had long pressed Philip's cause, and its prophecy for his invasion seemed all the more favorable in the light of Eastern dispatches. The ending of the old royal line by a double poisoning would not encourage Persian governors to defend their empire's western fringes, and further success in Asia was likely. Greeks had received honors equal to those of the gods before, and already in Greek cities there were hints that Philip would be worshipped in his lifetime for his powers of benefaction. Grateful subjects believed him to be specially protected by Zeus, ancestor of the Macedonian kings, and it was easy to liken his Blackbeard portrait to that of the king of the gods, or to display it prominently in local temples. The sacred enthronement of his statue may have been Philip's own innovation, but his explicit aim was to please his Greek guests, not to shock them by any impiety. Succeeded, for his example at Aigai became a custom, passing to the Macedonian kings who were later worshipped in Greek Asia, from them to Julius Caesar, and so to the emperors of Rome. As the images were carried into the arena, Philip ordered his bodyguards to leave him, for it would not be proper to appear in public among armed men, the mark of a tyrant, not an allied leader. Philip began to walk forwards, settling his white cloak about a body that showed the many wounds of 20 years fighting, one-eyed, black-bearded, a man whom Greek visitors had praised for his beauty scarcely 10 years before. A different approach is possible, taken from the murder's timing and its beneficiaries. Both of them broad arguments, but backed by facts in Pausanias's background, which owe nothing to Attalus or tales of unrequited love. Pausanias's people, accessible even in her exile, and she might not have found it hard to work on a nobleman whom Philip had recruited away from his local friendships. Of the murder's convenience Olympias is said to have allowed no doubt. She built a mound there for Pausanias, and saw that the people offered yearly sacrifices at it, having drummed them full of superstition. Olympias was a woman of wild emotion, who would later show no scruple in murdering family rivals who threatened her. Pausanias had evidently been assisted, not least by the men who waited with his other horses, and if Olympias had been his adviser, she could not have rested content with the mere fact of the crime. She was plotting for her return, and only her son, Philip's probable heir, could have guaranteed it. If she had reason to turn to Pausanias, She had reason to turn to her son Alexander, and though no remotely reliable evidence was ever cited against him, it is proper to consider his position too. It had already been said by Attalus that Eurydice's son would be more legitimate than those of other wives, and though the boy was only an infant, he had powerful relations to help him to a throne which had never passed on principle to the eldest son. Philip was murdered, Attalus was conveniently far away in Asia, and the boy was only a few weeks old. No sooner was Alexander king than the baby was killed and Attalus assassinated as a traitor too far from court to rally his friends. Fears for the succession had twice divided Alexander from Philip, but it is one thing to profit as a father's heir, quite another to kill him for the sake of his inheritance. The Persians say that nobody yet has killed his own father or mother, but that whenever such a crime seems to have happened, then it is inevitable that inquiry will prove that the so-called son was either adopted or illegitimate. The Persians, he said, had designed the murder themselves. March from Macedonia had just been invaded, and if Philip could be killed, his army could be expected to fall apart in the usual family quarrels. Persian boasts, however, are no guarantee of the truth, especially when they could have been made to attract allies against Philip's heir. Not so its likely effects, for Philip was dead, the man whose like had never been seen in Europe, and there was no reason to suppose that his 20-year-old son would ever claim his inheritance from the feuds of brother against brother, father against son, which a change of king had always inspired. We sit round our sea, Socrates the philosopher had told his friends, like frogs around a frog pond. Igai has been lost among varying stories and an array of half-reported histories. More than 20 contemporaries wrote of his career, but not one of their books survives in its original, and only one extract from a letter of Alexander is genuine beyond dispute. 400 years or more after his death, 2 historians and 2 abbreviators interwove or cut down his original histories, and it is from their long narratives that his life must mostly be recovered. Tudor England could only be recovered from Macaulay's essays and the histories of Hume the philosopher.